Oh, hello there. I didn't hear you come in. I was just writing down some questions I had for the Ask the Author segment, which is coming a little later during the season of the podcast. Allow me to put down what I was working on and we'll get going. You're listening to the Everglade Chronicles, a reading. I'm Garrett Shave, the author. We are halfway through the novel now as we begin Chapter 7, a history lesson. Now, let's get started. It was an overcast day. I could feel the rain about to pour down. It was almost June, and the end of the school year was drawing near. Madison had told me that a great celebration was held at the end of the school year to mark the beginning of an eternal summer. It was called the last day of school. Apparently, it was a paramount occasion spanning hours of endless celebrations. The Emperor was willing to start off the great summer with a war that would likely end with either him dying or Prince Oberyn overthrown. I walked across the Bermuda Bridge, seeing no one but Cutty Sark sail underneath. I stopped and waved at him, and he waved back. "Best of luck in your travels," I said. He didn't reply, but kept waving. I had to be cautious, because usually my every move was watched by the Elite Four. They did not seem to be here this afternoon, which was a nice change. Yet, I kept thinking that they were probably here somewhere. They almost always were. The samurai lurked like cobras in the tall grass. I kept my eyes down as I walked the gravel path around the island. There wasn't a soul around, not even guarding the pebbled pathway into the lost forest. When I finally did stumble into someone off of the old beaten path, it was someone I had least expected, Cora Hastings. She stood with a red leather jacket and a dark denim, leaning against a robust elm. She appeared as surprised as I was. Prince Oberyn was nearby, wearing civilian regalia. The dense tree cover protected them from prying eyes, especially eyes from my part of the Empire. "Theodore Walker, a pleasure," Mark said, immediately caught off guard. "What brings you?" At first I could not speak. I was seemingly petrified. Cora folded her arms. "Don't be afraid on my account. I was just leaving." "No, stay," I mumbled. I looked over at Mark and gave him a weary look. "I have received some distressing news. I have insider information. The Emperor is planning on raiding your borders this weekend. He wants you to get angry and attack. He wants war." Cora sighed. "The history of this place is written with revolution and war. How is this any different?" Mark clasped his hands and he began a steady pace. Interesting and worrisome. "The Lost Forest is at its peak of power," Cora carried on. "You've got nothing to fear, my friend." "I always have things to fear," Mark said. "The Emperor wants me dead. He wants to marry my consort. He wants the lands that once belonged to him." "Then you shall have to give him the fight of your life, like when we battled Queen Venus," Cora laughed triumphantly. "Now that was fun." "I wonder if these children can see through his veil of power," Mark carried on, rubbing his chin. I nodded. "The upper class can, yes. We know he is not as powerful as he sets out to be. It is all in his cult of personality, really. The working classes will have no inkling of his transparency," Cora observed. "They will still imagine him as the demigod you have been telling me about, Mark." "I will see what I can do about these raids," he said. "We usually have upped security on the weekends anyway, just in case, of course. Who did you hear this from?" "I have some friends on the inside, but they are angry at the unbalance of power," I smiled. "But I myself must tread carefully. They know I am curious and I keep asking questions. The Emperor himself chided me." Mark's eyes grew wide. "He spoke to you? Face to face? Did you figure out who he is?" I shook my head sadly. I am no closer to figuring out his mysterious identity. All I know is that he appears to be quite unimpressive. He is small. "If this Dragon Emperor wants confrontation, you should give it to him," Cora said. "You must let him make the first strike, however." "Yes, of course," Mark growled. "I am no rookie to this, you know. Next to our beloved Gabrielle Sinclair, I am the longest ruling monarch of this forest. Well, if you don't count the gods of old." Cora nodded and folded her arms. "Just be careful." "Will we ever have peace?" I asked. I have noticed and have been told about the constant revolution and the constant changing of ways here. Has there ever been a period of consistency and prosperity? It seems that whenever a good king or queen leaves, their successor is just overthrown. "That is the way of the children, Theo," Mark said thoughtfully. "They are both hungry for power and content for peace at the same time. Fickle, children are, undecided, wrought, and angry. There can only be peace in a reign, not a dynasty. It is the way of Everglade. Even someone as powerful and prosperous as your cousin Queen Isis could not have calculated or prepared herself that one day her own heir would be overthrown, Cora remarked. In truth, however, it is all lies in the preparation for an heir, Mark continued. Luke Price was ill-prepared. He was also not a primal choice in my mind. He could have been easily overthrown by anyone, really. I feel like that is something these rulers forget, Cora mused. They are so consumed with ruling that they forget to set aside time for their heir. Hell, half of them even forget to designate an heir. I laughed, but Mark nodded intently. It's very true, Theo. King Thomas, the ruler before Venus, had no heir set aside. Queen Venus herself had no specified heir either. Gabrielle had been planning since the day I arrived to make me her protege. I became her successor very early, but even then my thunder was stolen by Venus. I am not aware of any heir that the Dragon Emperor has been preparing, I remarked, thinking deeply. Then he will be easily overthrown, Cora yawned. If there is no public awareness of the one coming after, then anyone could inherit. At least if this Emperor brat introduced you all to his possible successor, he could rally support behind them. Then, in the event of his downfall, the successor would be able to secure and take control. I do not think there are enough kids that the Emperor trusts, I admitted. You have to have a great deal of trust for an heir, I think. You are leaving them your kingdom. Nothing worse than having no one to trust, not even in your own inner circle, Cora shook her head. I am considering who I must leave this land to, Mark said, staring off into the trees. Violet and I are planning on raising a child, and that child will have to be strong enough when I go to take over Gaia. I can feel my time is drawing near. Has any ruler of Everglade had a direct relation succeed them? I asked, generally curious. Before Thomas, probably, Cora remarked, but we do not know the history before then. It was not recorded. We have only the oral history around here told by the storytellers. I have the answer to that, given I am a storyteller, Mark giggled. Thomas came from the dynasty known as Rosewood. He tented his fingers. The Rosewood boys ruled Everglade for several seasons. I am unsure how many there were there. However, the one before Thomas had been Jonathan? I am not quite sure. They were real-life brothers. Mark placed both hands behind his back astutely. I was thinking that young Chad Green could be my child in the game. You probably do not know him. Both of us shook our heads. Sorry, never heard of him, Cora snickered. I should probably be going, I said, staring at the grass. Thank you for understanding, and thanks for the little history lesson. Even after I am gone, I am sure the meadow will be at war. There are little bits and pieces of harmony here and there. Every once in a while you get a good ruler who is bent on keeping the peace and promoting prosperity, Mark explained. But as I said before, children will be children. They are never truly happy. One day I hope that there will be true peace. Without fail, Friday loomed. I made my way to the meadow, meeting up with Victor and Lucille along the way. I did not tell them of the conversation I had with Zach in the library. I felt they would ask too many questions. It was sunny and warm that afternoon, weather which would culminate in the perfect evening battle. "How now, Lord Theo?" Lord Tetsuo was calling. We were walking across the crowded bridge, and he was standing on the other side. He was waving energetically. Kids seemed to be idling on the bridge, chatting and laughing, clogging up the main artery into the park. "How are you, my lord?" I asked. He was surrounded by police, and he seemed to be taking a tally of all the children crossing the bridge. "You are not in your city. Why is that?" "Crane asked me to do some counting," he replied quickly. "Mostly for population estimates, I should imagine. It is so hard to count over here. There are too many kids on the bridge." "Do you desire something of me?" I asked. "Yes, in fact I do," he smiled. He stopped his counting and looked over at me. "Your population has not changed, has it? Victor is your only able-bodied boy?" "Yes," I replied. "While Garth does come and go, I do believe he lives in the capital." "How unfortunate," Tetsuo replied and went back to counting. Commandant Alexei was looking for more able-bodied souls to take into the military, as it would seem. "Are girls not allowed to fight?" Lucille chirped up. Tetsuo stopped once more and stared at her. "Hardly, my dear, but the Commandant is looking for anyone who is able to join. The Emperor still prefers boys." "I would assume the Emperor himself is prejudiced against the strength and power of a woman," I remarked coldly. "I should have no trouble having girls in my army." Well, that's your honest opinion, the lord of the city was leering. Too bad it doesn't matter, now does it? I did not speak another word. My party moved along the asphalt path and around the bend. I could tell Lucille was angry. Female liberties seemed to be restricted in this time and age, despite better days under Isis and Luke. I even imagined that the tyrant Venus allowed girls in the military. Think nothing of it, I told her when we reached Cloverleaf. Girls have it better than us, I should think. You are allowed to hold powerful positions and not go to war. I would kill not to go to war. You're a lord, your grace, Lucille sighed. You won't have to go to war. You would think my lord would have a primal position as a colonel or something, Victor asked. I do not think I would like that, I admitted, laughing. I'd rather stay in our little paradise. Lord Tetsuo was a fool and a sheep, Victor said, adjusting his plastic armor. Exactly, I nodded. Think nothing of it. When the sun began to dip below the horizon and the sky was a vibrant orange and yellow mix, I walked along the gravel path towards sunset. I searched the open water for Cutty Sark, but he was not around. Now would have been the prime time to watch the sun go down and give the duchy some credit for its name. The royal city was buzzing with activity. Being Friday night, all the kids were here playing. Even the fields surrounding Sunset were filled with children laughing and playing make-believe. I found Madison overlooking her fields, staring down at the murky water. A few cattails and other watery shrubs were growing, and Madison appeared not to like them. Good evening, your grace, I bowed gently. She turned around and smiled. Evening, Lord Theo. How are you on this fine evening? Sure is gorgeous out. Yes, I said, stepping closer. She had her hair in pigtails on either side of her head. She wore dark denim and a flowing, frilly mint-green top. Her smile was inviting. I have something I wish to confess to you, and it is rather shocking. You might find it interesting. Oh? She asked. Nova came from inside the royal grotto, and we greeted each other. She was carrying a frosted glass of orange juice, some sort of lemony orange concoction. Shall we go back to the grove and speak of this matter? I nodded and followed the Duchess and her attendant back up the side of a small hill, and through a minuscule area of trees. She sat on her aged patio chair throne, sipping at her juice. Nova was off nearby, mixing me a glass. I call it Sunsetter, she laughed, sipping away. It is a delicious mixture of many citrus fruits and reflects the color of the sky at this time of day. I smiled, and Nova returned with the glass. The Duchess dismissed her, and I took a seat on a small stool in front of her throne. The Duchess looked foreboding and powerful from this angle. Now divulge your secret, young lord, she smiled. It did not take long for me to explain all that had happened, especially the talk with Commandant Alexei in the library. Madison had not known the Commandant to act in this manner, and was always quite stern when he visited her duchy. I also told her that Eva, Lucille, and Victor were there too, when Alexei first visited. That is interesting, she said, finishing her juice. I think he was waiting for me, or something like that, I admitted. Someone with strength and relation to Queen Isis, a boy who might have been told about her legacy from the Queen herself. He's in my class, and knows I'm a walker. He was probably praying to some god that I would join the kingdom game. That's an intriguing take on the matter, the Duchess thought. I think I agree with you. He has ascertained a powerful position near the Emperor, and is in a position to make some eager and interesting decisions. The legacy of Queen Isis still runs deep in the children here, and new generations are introduced to her prowess and her legends. The Dragon Emperor is working tirelessly to establish his own rule and wipe away the history of the past. What do you think I should do? Should I trust this Commandant Alexei? He seemed so kind, so friendly when we spoke in the library. He even divulged some major plans that the Emperor has. I think we can trust Zach Beverly, Madison remarked, leaning back. She was in deep thought. We are short on the revolutionary types around here. He seems like the trustful type. Besides, why would he tell you of the Emperor's plans if he wanted to trap you? Why would he tell you all of this in front of your subjects? She paused for a moment and stared at the rustling trees. Have you spoken with Mark and Violet yet? I saw Mark the other day, and I told him. Cora was there. Madison smiled. Good. So then the prince knows. That is good. Tetsuo was taking a tally of population earlier this afternoon, I said, remembering. He also told me that Alexei is gathering forces. Probably to launch the attack, Madison said. Back in my day there was an old edict called To Arms. Such an unlawful edict meant that the monarch, who at the time was Queen Venus, could call any able-bodied kid into battle, male or female. Queen Isis made the edict illegal and stripped it from the record. The Emperor might bring that back. Girls aren't allowed to serve, I noticed. The Duchess nodded. Yes, that was one of the first rules introduced by the Dragon Emperor. This is the first time in my history that girls haven't been able to serve in the military. I think it's disgusting and very prejudiced. I lived and served under 3 rulers, and all 3 allowed girls. Zack told me that the Dragon Emperor lived and served under Queen Isis, I said suddenly. I do not know who he is, but he was here in the meadow at the same time as my cousin. Zack also mentioned that he had a high position. Madison did not reply right away. She was thinking profoundly. I could see her eyes darting around, searching her mind for an answer. There were a host of evil boys back then, the Duchess admitted finally. I have a few ideas of who it could be, but no one to really pinpoint it. That's all right, I said, rising. I am sure we will find out who he is sooner or later. I marched back to my small lordship, finding Garth and Victor chatting near the bridge. I paid them little mind as I strolled across. They paid me some mind, bowing gently as befitted my rank. When I came to the tall tree near the lamp-post, an unusual visitor was waiting. Lady Sakura, in her elegant red kimono and holding her lacquered parasol, stood eloquently near Eva and Lucille. Her black hair was flowing, lips graced with light rose lip gloss and aroma erupting from her. It smelled like freesias. She looked like a geisha. She wore an inviting smirk. "Your Majesty," I bowed deeply. "Lord Theo," she smiled. I looked around. She was unguarded. Where were the Imperial Guards? "Do not bother looking for those boys who lock me up and keep me away from all of this," she growled, unfurling her red parasol. "They all have a soccer game this evening, so I am free to roam." "And you decided to come here?" I asked. The Queen of Rivers nodded intently. "Of course, my lord. You are one of my only friends here. You are the one of the few who actually recognizes my title." I placed my hand on my heart. "Rest assured, your Majesty, your title is respected and recognized in all of Cloverleaf." "Hear, hear," Eva called happily. "There is trouble at the palace." Her tone went dark. "Commandant Alexei is berating me, telling me that there will be war. Bah! I laugh in his face," she giggled. "I cannot imagine his strife, the poor half-bionic soul." "Is he even capable of reason?" "I respected the decisions of the Commandant," I remarked. "After all, he is only following orders on our master, the Exalted One." "Oh, please," she smirked light-heartedly. "We are in the company of good friends. There is no need to call that brat by his exaggerated title." "Still," I remarked in a hush, "I am afraid that a spy could be lurking anywhere." "I suppose you are right, your grace," she nodded, looking around. "I only came to say hello and tell you of such news. You are lucky, Lord Theo. You have but one boy in your land, aside from yourself. Lord Tetsuo will not make you give him up, especially if he is your personal guard." "I was not aware that the Emperor could take boys from his lands," I said. "I figured that there was a unified army aside from the civilians." "There is, to an extent," Eva butted in. "In the event of a battle or war, the Emperor is able to exercise some royal prerogative and summon civilians to war. The royal police are forced to join as well." So the rumors had been true. He was resurrecting the to-arms call. "Then why have a unified army if he can just call them to war?" I asked. "Hardly makes sense." "The boys in the military are military trained," Sakura observed. "The others, these civilians and commoners, are nothing. Yet, for some reason, he wants them to fight for him in the end." Before I could say much more, Garth and Victor were running across the bridge frantically. "What is it?" I asked, concerned. "Crane has arrived," Garth spoke quickly. "He has asked for Lady Sakura," Victor finished, out of breath. I sighed and turned to the fair lady. "How dare they?" she snarled. "I am a noble, an aristocrat, yet here I am, subject to the whim of a commoner. I am a queen, for Pete's sake." Crane had come across the bridge quietly, noticing the distress of the lady. I wasn't sure of what he had heard, but knowing him, it was probably everything. He was dressed in his samurai regalia, fitted with a conical hat. He gave me a menacing look. "Your Grace," he said quietly but sternly, "the Emperor demands your presence." "Demands, does he?" she growled. Crane nodded. "Yes, you are to return to Emperor's Perch immediately." "Can I not exercise my own free will?" She was challenging him fiercely. I could see the ferocity in her eyes. They were gleaming with defiance. The Emperor demands your presence, the Elite Four repeated himself more sternly. You cannot lawfully ignore a demand summons. It is treason, my lady. Lady Sakura let out a hiss of anger. Fine, she yelled. I shall go. It is treason to execute a queen. The samurai only nodded as he escorted her across the bridge, and that was the end of it. I wish there was something we could do for her, Eva remarked sadly. I hate to see her suffer, Lucille added. I nodded. Lady Sakura was a beautiful canary, trapped inside a wrought iron cage. Bound as the Emperor's former betrothed, she was trapped at the Emperor's perch. She was feisty, determined, and a popular figure among the general populace. She was also intriguingly mystical. Then an idea hit me like a stone brick. I have an idea, I said abruptly. I had been thinking, my arms folded and my mind deep in thought. Yes, go on, Victor mumbled. They all gathered close under the tree. I shall marry Lady Sakura, I said proudly. Gasps surrounded me, as did a few dropped jaws and wide eyes. It was a bold move, surely, given that she was the dragon's former choice for empress. Our marriage would solidify my claim on the lordship. It would also help her escape the torment of the Emperor. What do you think? I asked aloud. Impossible, Eva spat. How do you plan on doing that? Lucille gasped. What Eva said, Victor remarked. Garth decided to say nothing. I nodded. It's certainly a bold move. I will consent to that. I am sure it is possible, really. I could give my reasons to the Emperor, and he would have to either approve or disallow it. I need a Lady of Cloverleaf to make my reign here concrete. I need to start designating an heir here as well. Besides, who else can I wed that would be within my own social class? The Duchess of Sunset? Hardly. Eva nodded, and I could tell she was agreeing with me. You are one of the few nobles with actual land to your name, aside from a title. You would need to mentor an heir. Plus, Lady Sakura is the only eligible female aristocrat in this game, Lucille added thoughtfully. Other than that, you would have to marry out of your class, Victor said. I am glad you all agree with me, finally, after I have given my reasons, I smiled. The idea is a bit insane and laughable, but I feel it will help Lady Sakura in the long run. I do not really desire her as the Emperor desires Princess Violet. I only wish to help her. She will be free of the Emperor. Now, it is only up to the Exalted One, Eva said. He must let her go, and who knows if he will do that. He seems to enjoy the company of Lady Sakura. I believe he gets gratification from her torment, Garth sighed. That is an obstacle we must face, I remarked, thinking deeply once more. I turned to Lucille, who was smiling. Lucille, darling, I need you to do me a favor. I want you to go and see Lord Isaac, and I want you to tell him that I intend to marry. Given my rank and my title, I require the consent of the Emperor to wed. Do not tell his lordship who I intend to marry. Simply ask him to arrange a meeting with the Emperor, so that I might ask him personally. Understood, my lord, Lucille nodded. Shall I do that now or tomorrow? Let's just enjoy this lovely evening, I said, looking out over the water. Tomorrow will do. That concludes Chapter 7, a history lesson. Join me next week when I read Chapter 8, The Fury of the Dragon. Thank you all for listening and have a great week. See you next time. Dragon Boats by Fass is the music used during this novel on the podcast. Find us online on Facebook and Instagram by searching @Everglade Chronicles. You can find all 3 of the Everglade Chronicles novels exclusively on Amazon. Thank you kindly for your support.